It's about the restoration of our republic. We want to educate, encourage, enable the power. We stand for integrity, honesty, self-reliance, self-defense, and most importantly, no compromise on our foundational principles. This is America's Voice Now.
Find America's Voice Now on Facebook and at americasvoicenow.org. Here's Michael Evans.
Good morning, America. You're listening to America's Voice Now, and I'm glad to have you on board with us. We're going to cover a ton of stuff this morning, but we're really concerned about the latest violation of the law by the president, and we're going to talk extensively about what the experts, alleged experts and legal scholars, think of his activity and what he's accomplished. You know, I think part of the problem with this Bergdahl swap is that I don't think he was really anticipating the backlash that would come from that. And like most moves from the White House, it seemed ill-advised and poorly planned and not well conceived. We're going to talk a little bit about that because, you know, I believe that at this stage in the game, they're so desperate for any kind of a win after loss after loss after loss that they're willing to not even really pay attention to what they're trying to accomplish. They're just, you know, throwing, I don't know, it's like throwing money at the problem, you know, but not really having any kind of a plan or a solution in place. He broke the law, plain and simple. So now what? Now where do we go from here? That's going to be our first topic. Our second topic is what the legal experts are saying about the LawBreaker-In-Chief. And that is exactly how we should be looking upon him. Not only him, but his entire administration. He wasn't alone. Hagel was involved in this. And Hagel, as the defense secretary, should know better. Just because your boss says it's okay to break the law doesn't mean it is. If everyone followed the theory that just because your boss says it's okay to break the law, how would you ever convict anyone in a scandal involving private industry? I mean, how would you get the people on Wall Street who said, well, my boss just told me it was okay for me to lie and sell these securities that everybody knows are dog poop? So the real question is, once the legal experts have spoken, and by the way, they're all in unison, including all the liberal progressive groups, now what? Our third segment, Heaven's Gate, Jim Jones, and the climate change movement. I got to tell you, what we're seeing here in the concept of what's happening with climate change, and I mean, there was an article out this morning that scientists are admitting that the polar bear numbers were made up to, quote, satisfy public demand. I agree, and I've been saying this all along. Science is no longer pristine. It's no longer that corrupt-free area where men and women of integrity went to work in an attempt, you know, to discover new things, to be on the front edge of discovery, for the joy of discovery. Now it's some kind of a business, and it's all about getting commissioned for a piece of creative art, and that's become the new norm in science. You can follow the beliefs of Jim Jones or the folks over at Heaven's Gate, but in the end, your end will be the same. You won't find a different result, and you'll feel stupid for having committed suicide when the things that you state that you believe in have been so publicly and universally shown to be false. Or worse yet, faked just to meet someone's political agenda. And it's not just the public. You see, the problem is that we've even got the Pentagon wrestling with these bogus climate change warnings that they came out in a study from 2003. It's been debunked repeatedly. And yet, the Pentagon is still living by that. If someone stood there on the side of a street corner with a megaphone and said, the world's going to end at 5 o'clock on day so-and-so, and the world didn't end, would that person have credibility? Of course not. If they came out the following Monday and said the same thing again, claiming Friday was going to be the end of the world, and they did that week after week after week after week, after a little bit of time, everybody who goes by there every Monday would say, listen, pal, you've been wrong for 36 weeks in a row. What makes you think we should believe you today? In fact, it's gotten so bad that a Daily Beast columnist put out an article where the headline is actually, Obamacare's EPA coal plant regulations are Obamacare for the atmosphere. Wow. Wow. Just think about that. We're going to talk about it when we get to this segment. And on our fourth segment, we're going to talk about how the EPA regs are a fatwa of the cult of climate change. And I mean exactly that. The EPA regulations that are coming out, and you guys have to start looking at this like exactly what it is. They're running our government like a theocratic cult. It's the truth. They're issuing fatwas, but these fatwas come with guns to back them up. It's a tragedy. And it's dangerous. Let's jump into our first segment. Hardly anyone at this stage in the game, unless they're employed by the White House, can sit there and say the Bergdahl swap was good, that it was legitimate, that it was founded on good logic, reasonable justification. The soldiers who were with him clearly have stated alternatively that he was a deserter. We know that to be the case. In fact, they've even admitted it. They're hiding him from public view. I don't think they anticipated the backlash their actions would have. In fact, according to the New York Times, he left a note that explained the desertion and what he was trying to accomplish before he went AWOL and split. And the Pentagon knew all along where he was. They didn't want to go out and bother to get him back. He wasn't worth it. Not he wasn't worth it because he was an American soldier. He wasn't worth it because he was a deserter. But now they needed something. They needed something that would be a foreign policy win. And you see, that's the problem, people. We have become a nation that is so desperate for legacies and public viewpoints that we've lost the concept of doing what's right, irrespective of what the public response would be. I mean, here you've got a president that up until a short time ago himself said, I'm just using this as an example, he didn't agree with gay marriage. Then the moment he gets through his second reelection and he no longer has the consequences of his actions, he speaks out and comes out and says, yeah, I do agree with it. I've changed my mind. I've evolved on this point. You see, look, the truth is you don't change lifelong positions overnight. You're either were lying to us before or you're lying to us now for political expediency, but it can't be both. Either you were lying to us when you told us that you didn't support gay marriage because you really did, but you knew it was unpalatable in the United States of America, or you're lying to us now. But it can't be both. But political expediency is not why you make a move and release five, not to mention the 5 released months ago, just as an ante to set the table for a negotiation. So you don't release 10 Taliban big guys to get back one deserter. I mean, this kid wasn't even listed as a POW. So he wasn't a prisoner of war, which shows Jay Carney to be a liar as well. He came out and said, oh, he's a prisoner of war. He wasn't a prisoner. He wasn't listed as a prisoner of war. Now, the truth is, what Barack Obama has done here is a violation of the law. It's an impeachable offense, in fact. And that's not me stating that. That is the word of many legal scholars who have looked at this. There were a lot of good men that died searching for a deserter. Yesterday I saw Dick Cheney. Yeah, I know. Some people don't like that I refer to him as Darth Vader. But this guy is the blackest of the black. And of course he came out, which is unusual for a vice president to throw a current administration under the bus, which just goes to show you the breakdown of our political system and our political environment. Anything that Dick Cheney says, you better take with a grain of salt and triple check your facts, because the guy is, a human monster, frankly. And he has absolutely no problem making decisions based purely on political benefits. We know that to be the case from his own time as a vice president and his own time as a Secretary of Defense. But, look, the truth of the matter is, in this particular instance, he came out and he stated that we're going to pay a price for this because essentially now we've set the price for sale. In fact, this morning, a Cuban group has come out and said, well, if you want our guy back, your guy back that we're holding here in Cuba, you need to release these 5 Cuban insurgents that are being held by the United States. So we've already seen it. It's only been 48 hours. And already we've got Cuba coming back and saying, we'll do the same deal. How short-sighted. How stupid. How inflammatory. Because ultimately, that's what this is. He's inflamed the terrorists out there, the bad guys out there, the people who would do us harm, to go and snatch more Americans, because now they know what the price is for an American. Short-sighted, to say the least. Bad judgment, to say that, and that's the best thing you can say about it. Bad judgment. The truth is that he set us up, and not just him, but Hagel, in their desperate attempt to have something for a legacy. I'm so sick of hearing that word. Why would you destroy your entire nation so you can have some kind of a legacy? I mean, what goes behind that kind of thinking? If that's not the thinking of a self-absorbed, self-aggrandizing fool, I don't know what is. I mean, who is so impressed with themselves, so desperate for public accolade? You got to be kidding me. I mean, I get it. There's extroverts out there. There's people out there who, seek the adoration because they have no self-esteem without it, right? They're an empty vessel unless the world is fawning at their feet. Look at Hollywood. I mean, everybody in Hollywood. It's the same thing. How do I know that to be the truth? Well, go look at the total number of wrecked lives that there are in Hollywood. Wrecked over drug abuse, wrecked over their desperate need for adoration. And this guy's no different. The only difference is his stage isn't in Hollywood, it's in Washington, D.C. I mean, it's really ridiculous. We're going to let the whole country go to hell in a handbasket so that this guy can be thought of as something different. Well, I'm the first black president. I'm the first guy to have, you know what? I'm so sick of that crap. What we're going to remember you for is the first faithless, law-breaking, traitor, banana republic dictator that ever got a hold of the crown and the throne. Tell you what, it's just... He signed this law only, 6 months ago. It was the NDAA, the National Defense Authorization Act of 2013. Now, you've heard me talk about this before and talk about what the issues are and the problems are with this. But in this, he gave himself a signing statement, which, by the way, the progressives and the liberals in the country flipped out when Bush did that. You can't hedge your bets that way. Bop, 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 bop. Now, their guy does it, and it's like, oh, it's all A-okay. He says now that the law was unconstitutional, which begs the obvious question, what are you doing signing an unconstitutional law, Mr. President? I mean, I tell you what. And with all due respect, just because you've made a signing statement doesn't mean that you're not obligated to follow the law like the rest of us. I mean, you can let a guy out of jail and say, we want you to sign this document that says, I promise I'll never rob a bank again. But if he does do it and then he robs the bank, that doesn't give him the right to stand up and say, well, see, I signed the signing statement. I mean, you got to be kidding me. Now, the question is, some of the legal scholars out there, and we're going to talk about this in that segment, are stating that the signing statement itself and that the 30-day notice was a violation of the Constitution because, one, it subverted the power of the presidency, and that Congress should never have put the law together. But then the president should have vetoed it. I mean, you can't have it both ways. You can't say on one hand, I'm not going to veto this, I'm going to sign this, but I'm going to give myself a get-out-of-jail-free card, so when I violate it down the road, it doesn't work that way. Even the White House is coming out and saying, we didn't think it was going to be this controversial. Or at least elements within the White House, who, of course, want to remain unnamed because they fear they'd be crushed by Valerie for turning against the administration, their boss. They thought this was going to be like the betrayal that Reagan did to get the Iranian hostages back. What do I mean by the word betrayal? What, you didn't know that we released $8 billion? I'm sorry, $8 million, excuse me. You didn't realize that we released that money in order to get the people back from Iran back in 1981? Well, that's on you for not knowing that. See, a lot of people say, oh, man, that Reagan, he just scared those Iranian. He didn't scare anybody. He bought them off. We have a long history of saying one thing but doing something different. And of course, that shouldn't surprise anybody because that's what politicians do for a living. They lie. But no one doubts that this is a high crime and a misdemeanor. Here's the biggest problem that we've got with this, and I'm going to wrap with this thought, and then we're going to talk about what the legal experts are actually claiming in our next segment. But here's what the reality is. We, as a nation, can be as outraged as we want. But Congress will do nothing about another break of the law. They will do nothing about another violation of the law unless the vast majority of Americans stand up in outrage and demand they do something. If you want to see this president impeached, if you want to see him removed from office just to protect us from any further damage, that's the way it's going to have to be, folks. Because they don't have the guts and the backbone to do it when the wind's blowing against them. And that's the truth. Their bread is buttered a different way than yours. And they're never going to do it unless we demand it. All right, before we break, I'd like you to support American Resume Service because they're supporting this program. They have a website at AmericanResumeService.com. They offer a program that is available only to America's Voice Now listeners. It's a special program that where they have a $200 resume package where they go out and build your resume from scratch, or take the one that you've got, do an interview with you, and then retune and refine it to give you the highest opportunity or the highest chance to have that opportunity to get the interview. And that's essentially what job seeking is all about, right? You got to get that interview. And the resume just gets you in the door. Once you get in the door, you can convince them. But you need to get in there. They have over 20,000 clients who are, over the past 25 years, whom they've successfully helped find jobs. And you can call them at 417-264-2486, or you can email them at info@AmericanResumeService.com. The point of this program is they're giving you a 50% discount off their normal rate, and then in addition to that, they're going to take that whole $100 and donate it to America's Voice Now so we can stay on the air. I think that's a wonderful service, not only for you, but also for us, and I'm very, very appreciative of who and what they're doing. I think that's very gracious of them, and I'm very much appreciative of it. Make sure that you visit our friends as well over at Battery Station at batterystation.com. You can find they've got every kind of flashlight that's made by virtually every manufacturer out there. In addition to that, they carry every battery that's out there, essentially, except for watch batteries. Even some of those they carry. If you can't find what you want on their website at batterystation.com, you can call them at 417-257-7799. Now, while you're at it, and if you're going to be in town visiting Battery Station, and they're located on Washington Avenue in West Plains at 303 Washington Avenue, while you're at it, you can swing by Pizza Hut. Tuesdays and Thursdays, they have reduced price lunches and at their salad bar and pizza bar. And then on Tuesday nights, kids under 12 eat free, and it's family night. And that's a great opportunity for you to take the entire family in for something that's tasty and healthy at the same time. They have a beautiful salad bar out there. They've got a pizza bar, a pasta bar, and they've got all kinds of good stuff out there. So make sure that you swing into Pizza Hut tonight with your family or this afternoon for lunch, and mention to your server or the store manager that you heard about it on America's Voice Now. We're going to take a quick break. When we return, we're going to tackle this topic of what the legal experts say about Obama as the lawbreaker-in-chief. We'll be right back. Like to be part of the conversation here this morning, you can. You can call us on our new phone system, and by the way, we got whatever the quirk was yesterday fixed. You can call us at 573-453-5505. I'd like to hear your input on these issues. You can simply dial 573-453-5505, and we'll bring you on the air, and we'll hear your opinion about your issues surrounding this issue with Bergdahl and the release of these Taliban detainees who were held at Gitmo and Guantanamo Bay for 12 years. I mean, these guys were considered and classified as the worst of the worst. And the 5 that were released the other day in exchange for Bergdahl was the second release. The first release occurred back in July and August when we released 5 more to set the table so that as a bribe, as an ante to the Taliban to begin talks. Not to mention, by the way, that the Taliban came out yesterday and said that they're cutting off all future talks with the United States, which, of course, the United States swears isn't happening in the first place. So go figure. I mean, who do you believe anymore, folks? I can tell you this. You can't believe the government and you can't believe the mainstream ministry of propaganda. You can't, because they're lying through their teeth to us. That's the truth. Everything that they tell you is subject to an enormous amount of review. In this case, or in this segment, we're going to talk about what the legal experts say, because there's a lot of them who are coming out. I mean, I heard yesterday Judge Napolitano. Now, some people would say, oh, he's partisan. Okay. Judge Napolitano came out and said on Megyn Kelly's show, Kelly File, that this is an offense which is clearly violative of the law. And the biggest problem was that they pointed out that it has to have his claim was that it was for aiding or material aid, providing material aid to the Taliban. Now, of course, Megyn Kelly, who's an attorney, by the way, herself, she made a very legitimate point, which is that the second part of that, I mean, yes, he falls under the category of the first part of that as a lawbreaker. However, under the second part of that, it says that you have to physically intend, there has to be intent in your assistance to aid and abet, right? And provide material assistance with the idea that you're giving comfort and aid to the enemy. And there has to be intent. That would be virtually impossible to prove, irrespective of what you suspect. However, that's not the only voice that's come out and raised the argument. Now, there was a couple out there, including Jeffrey Toobin. Now, Jeffrey Toobin is pretty much an apologist on Communist News Network. And he came out, and he's their legal analyst, kind of like what Judge Napolitano is on Fox. And he declared on Monday that President Barack Obama broke the law. That's his quote. When his administration failed to give Congress notice of at least 30 days before releasing the 5 ranking Taliban members from Guantanamo Bay. He argues that the presidential signing statement does not absolve Obama from culpability for failing to abide by the law. Quote, I think he clearly broke the law. The law says 30 days notice. He didn't give 30 days notice. He added that Obama's opinion expressed in the signing statement is not the law, and it can't be construed as part of the law. The law is on the books, and he didn't follow it, says Toobin. Well, with all due respect, I want to know where all of these pundits were when he was doing the same thing with Obamacare. I want to know where all the pundits were when he was doing the same thing with the IRS. I want to know where all these pundits were about Fast and Furious, where they are about immigration, where they are about the DREAM Act. Wolf Blitzer asked him and pointed out that George Bush also issued signing statements, even though their action may not have been constitutional or illegal. But liberals, he pointed out, Blitzer in other words, liberals were outraged by George Bush's signing statements. And then Blitzer looked over at Toobin and said, you realize, of course, you're accusing the President of the United States of breaking the law. And Toobin said, I do think that his critics have a very good point here. He pointed out that Congress and the courts are unlikely to do anything about it, however. But it matters whether people follow the law or not. Well, of course it matters. Because if we don't have the law, then we don't have anything. We're not a republic anymore. We're gangland thuggery. Which is what I've been saying all along. That's exactly what we are. And we were under Bush, and we were under Clinton, we were under Bush Sr., we were under Reagan, and it just goes on and on and on. We were even under Peanut Boy, Carter. Come on, folks. Are you trying to tell me this is something new? You're welcome to call in with your comments, by the way. 573-453-5505. So if Toobin's saying that, who else is saying that? Well, Jonathan Turley. Now, Toobin, by the way, for the record, he's the legal analyst at Communist News Network, CNN. But Jonathan Turley is a law professor, and he is a self-proclaimed a voter for Obama in both elections. And he actually states repeatedly that he agrees with his policies. He just doesn't agree with the way he's breaking the law. He's a constitutional professor, and he's a professor at George Washington University of Law. He said on Monday that he doesn't believe there's much debate over whether the White House broke the law by releasing the 5 high-ranking Taliban prisoners. He notes that even the White House is seriously arguing that it's not violating the law, or that it didn't violate the law. He also was invited to Communist News Network, and he spoke with Carol Costello, who's one of their anchors over there. And he said, Costello asked him, did the White House violate federal law? And Turley replied, they did. I don't think that the White House is seriously arguing that they're not violating federal law. And to make matters worse, this is a long series of violations of federal law that the president's been accused of. This is going to add to that pile. I don't think there's much debate that they're in violation of the law. He argued that Obama is essentially arguing the very same principle as George Bush, that when it comes to Gitmo, he has almost absolute power, that it's his prerogative, his inherent authority to be able to make these decisions as he sees fit. Folks, ask yourself, is that a republic, or is that some sort of a quasi-totalitarianistic fascist dictatorship? I mean, if a president has the right to make unilateral decisions about everything from life to death relating to anyone who the administration claims to be a threat, is that what we believe as a nation? Costello asked him, well, does it matter? In other words, all of this law breaking, does it matter? Because the administration says that the Department of Defense consulted with the Justice Department, and that was enough. Does it matter? And again, I'm going to point you to something. I mentioned this yesterday, that just because the Justice Department says, hey, you've got our blessing here, doesn't make it legal, doesn't make it right. I mean, look, in fascist dictatorships across the planet, they've got legal experts that say, sure, you're entitled to do anything you want. I mean, I hate to bring up the argument and use the term Hitler, because as soon as you do that, everybody goes, oh, I want to plug my ears. Well, they made it legal to kill the people that they construed to be mentally ill or not a benefit to society, including the mentally retarded and Down syndrome children. They made it completely legal. It doesn't make it right, but they did give legal backing to the decision. Now, these weren't people that they killed over a theological discussion or difference. These weren't people that they killed because they were Jews. These were Germans. They made it legal. If you're mentally retarded and you're going to pollute our gene pool, went their theory, then we have the right to take you out. And they got legal authority and backing to make those decisions. That didn't make it right. They had legal authority and backing to seize the property and the people of anyone who, what? Not just because they were Jewish, but if you disagreed with the administration, if you fought back against what the Nazis were doing, and you were a German citizen of pure Aryan blood, they made it legal for you to be disenfranchised, stripped of your property and your holdings, and thrown into a prison just for disagreeing, for working towards a humanitarian effort of trying to hide other people that were being ostracized and persecuted. Does that make it right? Just because their legal authorities said, yeah, it's legal. I mean, Stalin did the same thing. Mao did the same thing. Pol Pot did the same thing. Idi Amin did the same thing. Doesn't make it right. Castro did the same thing. We deplore all of those scenarios. Why would we be willing to accept it from our own president? Again, Costello asked, well, does it matter? Because the administration says the Department of Defense consulted with the Justice Department. And that was enough. Does that matter, she said. Well, unfortunately, said Turley, the Justice Department has been involved in many of these controversies, and they tend to support federal power. The federal law seems quite clear. And the fact that you have negotiations that have gone on for years really undermines the argument that this was a matter where time was of the essence. He went on to say, clearly you have committees with classified proceedings, people who have been cleared for this information that could have been consulted. And this is really the reason that they enacted the law. So what he's basically stating there, and Turley, again, he's an Obama advocate in terms of his presidency, but he likes his policies, the social justice and the liberal thinking, but he doesn't like the fact that he's constantly breaking the law. I mean, I wouldn't agree with Jonathan Turley on a lot of the policy decisions that Barack Obama has made, and I probably wouldn't agree on a lot of the reasons why he approved or voted for him. But I have to admit that at least Turley is honest enough, intellectually honest, and true enough to the ideals of what he believes in and teaches at a university to come out and say, hey, the guy's breaking the law, even though I support him. We need 10,000 more like him. And he's right. The Justice Department has always supported this president, even when, but it's a de facto, it's a de facto fraud when you've got the Justice Department that supports every illegal administrative maneuver that the president makes. First of all, the president appointed this particular attorney general. So you can't expect that the attorney general is going to find against his own boss and his benefactor, quite frankly, which is why the Department of Justice should never be appointed by the administration itself. In fact, the whole idea of a federal Department of Justice, I can understand that we want one because there are instances where the federal government needs guidance. But it should be a minuscule organization of 20, 25 people, not 25,000, who are running around prosecuting average everyday Americans for all these crimes that have become federal felonies that, quite frankly, the federal government has no right to even make a decision about. These aren't crimes. The Constitution doesn't call for federal crime. Those are state crimes. You're to be prosecuted in state courts under state rules. There are no federal crimes except treason. It's the only federal crime there is, folks. With a couple of limited exceptions. But the idea that, we've turned everything into a federal crime because, you crossed a state boundary. Oh, come on. It would have been a state crime were it not for the fact that you drove over a border with that marijuana in the trunk or whatever the case may be. So now it's a federal crime. That's the way they interpret it. What it has turned into is a massive overreach. This Justice Department is, look, no one at this point can justify what this Justice Department has become. No one. Now, Senator Claire McCaskill, she came out and she is screaming that the GOP's criticism on the swap is unwarranted. Her argument is that if the guy had died, that, you know, it came out later on that there was an opportunity here and the president didn't take it, that, you know, the Republicans would be going crazy. And she's right. But the truth is, the guy was not, first of all, in much danger. Second of all, they could have alleviated that concern by simply exposing the truth to the American people. Do you think the American people and or the Republicans would have jumped in line behind a guy who was a clear deserter? They knew he was a deserter. They classified him as such themselves. In fact, they didn't have him listed as a prisoner of war. So how can you call him they wouldn't list him as a prisoner of war, but simultaneously they gave him 2 promotions. First to specialist from General Grunt to sergeant. See, the whole thing is just ridiculous because she's sitting here trying to defend the indefensible by using the argument that, well, you know, if it turns out later on that this opportunity was out there and the president didn't take advantage of it, and somehow or other this guy slipped on a rock and fell and broke his brain open, and, you know, then he died in the hands of the Taliban, that everybody would be throwing. Well, I wouldn't disagree with that argument. But I would say that the fair argument would have been for the government to come forth and say openly and make it public. Bo Bergdahl has deserted, and therefore we're not under any obligation to put anyone else or any more time or the American people or any other soldiers at risk. End of argument. But you see, they were more interested in achieving their agenda, which is furthering the Taliban's activities. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is aiding and abetting an enemy, providing material assistance. And I don't care that Qatar has given us a 1-year guarantee of house arrest, because during house arrest, one, they can conduct any kind of leadership they want. I heard one of these knuckleheads yesterday talking on one of the news programs saying, well, these guys are going to be held there in Qatar, and they're not going to have, their network has been broken apart because they've been in prison for 12 years and their networking capabilities are over. Horse hockey. These guys were accepted back as heroes. And they'll be elevated immediately to positions of leadership and authority. That kind of thinking assumes, first and foremost, that they are operating on Western thought processes, which they ain't. And if we haven't learned that by now, we really shouldn't be in Afghanistan and Iraq or anywhere else in the Middle East. They don't think the way we think. And frankly, these people in government don't think the way we think either. They don't use rational, logical, well-reasoned arguments. They don't look at consequences. They don't look beyond to find out and role play it out to say, you know, let's play this tape to the end and see how it comes out. An administration that was acting with responsibility would have said, you know what, the weight of this and the weight of releasing these 5 people, the risk does not balance out the benefit that we get by getting back Mr. Bergdahl. And when the American people find out about this, the top of their head's going to go bonk. And guess what happened? The top of Americans' heads are going, whoop. And these idiots didn't even think about it. Their argument was, well, we were just as surprised by what we saw in the media. Here we go again with the media. I mean, You cannot talk about more ineptitude and absolute keystone coppery than these people have shown us. This sycophant McCaskill says, we saved this man's life. Well, guess what? Even the liberal newscasters who were trying to find something to apologize for this guy's behavior for could not get Susan Rice to say his life was ever in danger. There's nothing to substantiate that. That's another one of these claims like we got in Benghazi. She says that we saved this man's life. The commander-in-chief acted within his constitutional authority. Well, I beg to differ, Ms. McCaskill. Number one, you may be an attorney, an esquire, but I can tell you this. Every constitutional expert out there disagrees with you. And you are, if anything, you are the furthest thing from a constitutional expert. She says, we saved an American life on foreign soil. The president and foreign policy gets criticized. Are you seeing a theme here? It's politics. No, what is politics, Ms. McCaskill, is that statement you just made. And you should be ashamed of yourself. And if any American heard it and didn't pick it up for exactly what that was, the pot calling the kettle black, and that's a failure of critical thinking. The truth is, every legal expert in the nation is calling it what it is. An act of lawlessness on the part of our government, on the part of our own president. And now I just want to know, since the president had a private meeting with Hills, did she know? I can't wait to hear this backpedal. All right, our next segment, Heaven's Gate, Jim Jones, and the climate change movement. I'm going to draw some correlations for you that I think are important because I want you to understand exactly how desperate and how illogical what's going on with climate change and the EPA and the Pentagon and all of this movement towards solving a problem that doesn't exist has become. It's irrational. And it's a cult. And your president is leading the charge. He's the Jim Jones. It's a cult of suicide. Problem is, we're not asked whether or not we want to be dragged along with it. The cult is making decisions on our behalf. All right, make sure that you support our friends over at Battery Station. You can find them on the web at batterystation.com. And they have an enormous product supply of and selection of batteries, many of which they private label themselves, and get those because those are the least expensive ones, and they're exactly what you'd get paying twice as much in the store for them. They have a full selection of every kind of light, headlamp, batteries, all kinds of vehicle batteries, motorcycle batteries, boat batteries, the whole 9 yards. Everything down to those little tiny little widget batteries. You can call them at 417-257-7799. You can go to their website at batterystation.com. And you can visit them at 303 Washington Avenue in West Plains, Missouri, if you like. While you're there, make sure that you swing by our friends at Pizza Hut. Today is reduced price lunch. It's $5, and you get the full pizza bar and salad bar. And then tonight, kids under 12 eat free, and it's family night. So swing in there and take advantage of that, especially at the Pizza Hut on Porter Wagoner Boulevard in West Plains. That's the place to go. Make sure that you tell them you heard about their program and this ad on America's Voice Now. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back. When we come back, Heaven's Gate, Jim Jones, and the climate change movement. Should be an interesting segment, folks. We'll be right back.
It's about the restoration of our republic. We want to educate, encourage, enable the power. We stand for integrity, honesty, self-reliance, self-defense, and most importantly, no compromise on our foundational principles. This is America's Voice Now.
Find America's Voice Now on Facebook and at americasvoicenow.org. Here's Michael Evans.
Good morning, America. You're listening to America's Voice Now, and my name is Michael Evans. I'll be your host this morning. You're joining us in our third segment this morning, and we're going to be talking about the issue of the cult of climate change. And when I say the cult of climate change, I know there's a lot of people out there that are sitting on the fence. There's a lot of folks out there that believe in climate change. They've kind of been given the mantra, and they've fallen for it. They've been taken in. And I got to ask you, if there's one thing that is if there's one thing in human nature that is a flaw for us, I got to tell you what it is. We, collectively, as a group, are unwilling to admit when we've been wrong. And with all due respect to everyone listening, it is the largest fallacy, the largest failing that we have. When I say that, I mean, the reason I should say I mean it that way is because by refusing to acknowledge that we've been tricked, because we are either unwilling to acknowledge to ourselves that we've been taken advantage of, or we have labored on behalf of some stated belief and staunchly defended it long and hard in front of others. And now we don't want to go back and say, hey, you know what? I was wrong. We shouldn't have voted this guy in. I got taken in. I'm sorry. There's very few people in the country who have been able to say that since 2008 and then again in 2012. Do you know why? Because we're all about perception and nothing about reality. We're more worried about what people think of us than we are about following what we know to be true, listening to that small voice in the back of our mind that says, hey, wait a second, something's wrong here. You see, by allowing ourselves to be taken in, we've made a mistake. But we compound that when we refuse to admit that we were taken in and we were wrong in our judgment, or that we followed the wrong lead. And that is the same mistake, folks, that every member of every cult makes. They for whatever reason, they are unwilling to admit that they've been misled, and we're gullible enough to be taken in. These new EPA rulings that are out there, and I mean, senators are coming out and predicting pain. This is their words, not mine. Pain. David Vitter says that the President Obama's new regulations on carbon emissions for existing power plants on the part of a climate action plan will be a huge blow to American pocketbooks. This rule is all pain, no gain. American families and businesses will have to shoulder all the costs and burdens from this rule without contributing to any significant reduction in global carbon emissions. It's cap and trade all over again, but this time without giving the American public a voice to vote on it in Congress. This rule is just a payday for President Barack Obama's friends and political allies. Mitch McConnell. Another tragedy is today's announcement is that for all of the pain this new rule will inflict on ordinary Americans, there is no clear benefit. These new rules will cheer the far-left patrons of Washington liberals, but there is simply no question that our competitors around the world will eagerly replace whatever industry we lose as a result of these new rulings. The notion that these competitors will follow our lead is pure and utter fantasy. Now, I'm not a big fan of Mitch McConnell. In fact, if you've listened to me long enough, you know that I don't have anything good to say about Mitch McConnell. But in this case, I got to applaud his statement. He's accurate. But you see, the problem is that we consistently sit here and allow ourselves to be taken in time and time and time again by the same nonsensical garbage over and over and over. We heard this crap about Obamacare, and we allowed ourselves to be taken in. Well, guess what? In the Daily Beast, there's a brand new article out there called EPA's New Regulations to Cut Carbon Emissions or Obamacare for the Air. How much Kool-Aid have you drunk? I mean, why would you sit here and consistently continue to listen to this guy from Heaven's Gate preach about a comet coming here, and when it sweeps by, you're going to be magically transported into the comet and into a celestial event? And too late, you realize that I'm about to kill myself over a belief that has no foundational basis. This dolt in the Daily Beast, Jason Mark, he says, just like healthcare, listen to the thinking behind this, and tell me that you can draw any comparison whatsoever to a logical, rational thought process. Just like healthcare, the plan to change the energy industry relies on a complex set of rules that harnesses the power of the marketplace, and it will be controversial. Wow. You got to be kidding me, right? No, I'm not kidding you. In fact, let me throw this out there. What that tells us, first of all, I want you to note the use of the word rules, right? I want you to hear this statement again. Just like healthcare, the plan to change the energy industry relies on a complex set of rules that harnesses the power of the marketplace. Okay. First and foremost, notice the word rules and how they use it. The reference is to complexity and harnessing. Since when can you have free enterprise when government is in charge of it? It's not free enterprise anymore. Laissez-faire capitalism doesn't flourish when the government is in control of it. Then it's no longer capitalism. It's now fascism. What this tells you is that this guy who wrote this is a statist with delusions of grandeur that government can solve everything by total abject control. We've already seen the results of Obamacare, so don't believe it. The climate change mantra is a hoax, and it has been a hoax on a parallel with still believing in the Jim Jones cult. Long after everybody's been dead and the apocalyptic predictions and the doom dates that he gave came and went. You see, folks, logic, rational thought, and common sense will guide you. If only you will allow it to. And you will be assured, and you will have to work hard to not be led astray by the sparkly charms and the dangled promises of utopia that are given to you by statists who are just trying to manipulate you. We've seen the results of Obamacare. We want that now for our air, our water, and the rest of our economy? I mean, if you follow this knucklehead's way of thinking, this is all good for us. He starts out his article, environmentally concerned voters will finally get what they paid for by giving their political support to President Barack Obama when Monday morning in Washington, Environmental Protection Agency Administrator Gina McCarthy unveils the draft of sweeping new regulations on existing power plants. Why are we subject to the whims of a small minority of environmental brainwashed people? I mean, look, we all want clean water and air, but we can't kill ourselves to get it. Then that's self-defeating. What's the point? If we bankrupt ourselves, if we kill ourselves to accomplish the better world for humans, and there are no humans around to enjoy it, then what was the point? mean, this is just the absurdity of this type of thinking is and should be. It should be as foreign to your mind as me saying to you, I want to take you up on the George Washington Bridge or the San Francisco Bridge, and I want you to jump. I don't want you to have a parachute, and you're not going to have a bungee cord. I just want you to jump. You'll make it. You'll live. I mean, 99.9 of people out of 100 would say, no way. Yet when we're told that it's okay for us to do this, that slashing these power plant emissions by 25% and 30% by 2030 are actually going to benefit us, when we know that we have nothing to replace it with. I mean, I'm not... look, here's what I'm saying to you. Listen, I don't want you to just give me your coat. I want you to give me the coat that you have and your family has. And you guys can just, struggle through the winter. No, I realize it's going to be a long walk home. But for the benefit of the country, you got to give us your coat and you got to give me the keys to your car, and you guys can walk home. Who would do that? It's 3 degrees outside. You and your family are at danger. The Pentagon, to make this matter even worse, the Pentagon is operating from a 11-year-old report that was a 2003 report called An Abrupt Climate Change Scenario and Its Implications for United States National Security. This report was issued in 2003. And even the guy who authored the report says, I'm surprised they took it as seriously as they did. What it was a report that was founded and built upon worst-case scenarios. It was a role-playing scenario. What would happen if, California, sank into the ocean, and these guys are treating it as if it's gospel, as if it's written from the book of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, cut into stone tablet. First of all, it was a paid-for climate study. So it was a commissioned piece of art. Secondly, it was a role-playing what-if scenario. It wasn't meant to be taken as gospel. And consultants at that time told the military that. And in this document, they said that by now, by 2014, California would be flooded and would have become an inland sea. The Hague would be unlivable. That polar ice caps would be mostly gone in the summertime, and that global temperatures would rise by as much as a half a degree, 0.5 degrees a year. Well, let me debunk right off the bat the climate change, the rise in temperature. It's raised less than 0.1 overall in the last 15 years. And by the way, in case you haven't noticed, the Hague is still livable. The polar ice cap has actually grown, not shrunk. And California, much to our chagrin, is not underwater yet. It was the Kickstarter for this Pentagon movement to switch over to green this and green that. This fuel they're paying $125, $135 a gallon for when normal gas is going for $2.50. And they're buying hundreds of millions of gallons. Yeah. And we wonder why the Pentagon is saying we need more money. We need more money. Well, stop spending money on stuff that doesn't exist. Stop believing in the Jim Jones cult of climate change. That comet's coming, I know it. We're just going to lay down here on the bed and we're going to take our cyanide. The problem is that, We're all connected together. So when you take cyanide, we all get it too. See, the problem is they're all operating on flawed and faked science. This was not even meant to be, and it was never intended to be, a legitimate piece of science. It was a what-if scenario. It's not something that you would base an entire national defense policy on. It's been fully debunked, and it's still the guiding document for these idiots. Basing a national defense strategy on the Heaven's Gate cult would be stupid, and it would be suicidal. Basing a nation's defense strategy on a 2003 report, which was provided as a worst-case scenario think tank what-if scenario, is no different. It's insane. And yet it's the rule of the day. I posted an article up on our Facebook page this morning. Scientists admit the polar bear numbers that were so widely touted as, oh, the polar bears are dying off, blah, 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 that they were made up to satisfy public demand. Did you hear what I just said? Scientists admit polar bear numbers were made up to, quote, satisfy public demand. Science is no longer a pristine, corruption-free area where the folks that are involved in it are doing it because they believe in something greater than themselves, in the idea and the concept of discovery for advancing man's knowledge. Now it's simply a means of making a living. And because it's been polluted with the concept of greed, and it's been corrupted, science has become a game of commissioning a piece of creative artwork. That, ladies and gentlemen, is what we're basing our entire public, our entire foreign policy on, our public policy, our energy policy, our educational policies. I mean, you got to be kidding me. Why would we do this? You may as well pick up Hansel and Gretel or the Grimm Brothers fairy tales, read that and say, yep, this is truly representative of our world. We're going to start making policy based on what we found in this book. It's insane. I'm going to bring Mike Slack on with us this morning. I wanted him to talk a little bit about Go Green Festival, which is not what you think, but it is an environmentally sensitive program where you're taught how to live more in harmony with nature, but not necessarily along the lines of this nonsense about, going green in the way that the environmental troglodytes and extremists believe. Hi, Mike. Good morning. Can you hear me?
Hi, you're on a roll today, Mike. It's a great show.
Thanks.
And, we added the two words self-reliance to the name of our festival. It's the Go Green Self-Reliance Festival.
There you go.
That was probably 3 years ago because of confusion. Some people thought when they heard the name, I walked into the Mountain Grove PRC one time to plug it. Didn't know very many people there then, and they thought I was Al Gore's assistant. So we added those words to the name.
Well, you didn't fly in on a Learjet or anything, right, with a carbon footprint the size of Maine, did you?
No, and I don't have his money. But anyway, I wanted everybody to know it's June 21st and 22nd. That's a Saturday and Sunday.
Okay, June 21 and 22nd, and this is going to be held in Thayer, correct?
Yes, at the City Park, right around the rodeo arena.
Okay. Now,
9 a.m. to 6 both days.
Okay. 9 a.m. to 6 p.m.?
Yes, Admission is free for attending.
Okay.
Admission is free for vendors.
Okay.
We had 150 vendors last time.
Outstanding.
A lot of folks have handmade items. We had some Amish folks selling produce. A lot of folks had canned goods, jams and jellies they'd made, quilts, a lot of raffles going on, an awful lot of local businesses. I was happy to see we're there because we're trying to really promote our local economy.
Right.
Remember, Forster's Hardware brought everything they had that fitted into alternative energy, and we were happy to see them there.
Well, there's all kinds of
Crowder
things,
College.
Mike, last year that were about self-reliance in terms of how to become more self-sufficient. I'm thinking specifically of the truck that was there that burns wood instead of gas, right? The wood gas truck. I'm thinking about.
You had a good time riding around in that.
I
truck.
did, and I understand you're going to have a different one there this year. But I'm also thinking about
this
Darren
is
and
not-
I'm also thinking about Darren and the well water boy thing, where he's got that handmade pump that can pump water up 500 feet. I mean, from a well. That's unbelievable.
Oh, yeah.
Almost nothing else in the marketplace can do that without electric power. I mean, this guy is a local
No,
guy
Darren
who's
is like
invented
Thomas
something
Edison of
incredible.
Missouri.
Say again?
Yeah. Darren is like the Thomas Edison of the Ozarks. He's a
He
genius.
really is.
Stuff.
He really is.
And now the truck will have, it uses wood gas, burning firewood to run.
Right.
This is a different truck built by the same man.
Okay.
And this one he sold to a fellow in Springfield who travels with it, promotes it. And then a professor at MSU is going to come in with a wood gas generator to make electricity for your home.
Now I'm excited
And
because
Mike-
that to me
Uh-huh.
is the that's the king application, especially here in southern Missouri or in the Ozarks, where you've got unlimited sources of firewood. And the idea
Exactly. And if you don't like the wood gas method at all, Mike Brown will be there showing you how to make a steam engine and
Right.
also make electricity for your home burning firewood.
Mike Brown also has books and studies on how to make your own grain alcohol or make your own alcohol that you can use for fuel. And he's got a foolproof and easy method of distillation that anybody can do to create enough fuel to be self-sufficient for you and your family. So if you have an opportunity, Mike, give me the dates. It's the Go Green Self-Reliance Festival, and it's going to be in Thayer this year. And Mike, give me the date real quick. We're getting cut off by the music. I apologize. Folks, I'll make sure I have those dates for you, and I'll be posting them up on our website so that you can find more information about it. This Go Green Festival is something which has been happening down in Thayer for years now, and it's been very, very successful, and I encourage you to participate in it. There are reasons for you to be self-reliant, and we're seeing them around us every day, so don't miss out that opportunity. If you can get down here to Thayer to visit the Go Green Festival, you'll see some amazing things that will definitely improve and benefit you and your life and your ability to prepare and defend yourself and your family against what we know to be coming at us. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk about how these EPA regulations have become the fatwa of the cult of climate change. We'll be right back. Somebody say to me the other day, and I use that phrase, that the EPA regulations are like a fatwa in the cult of climate change, which is, associated with Islam, and a fatwa, as you know, is a declaration by an imam or a religious leader, which is an edict, it's a mandate, it's an order to do something specific. And I had somebody say to me the other day, "You're just trying to be controversial." Well, I disagree. I'm actually not trying to be controversial. I'm just pointing out to you the absurdity. You wouldn't listen to a fatwa given by a Muslim imam to not allow your wife to drive, because you'd say to yourself, well, wait a minute. first of all, I don't believe in that. Secondly, I want my wife to be able to drive. One, because she's an intelligent, articulate human being with rights and privileges of her own, just based on the fact that she's alive. Secondly, it's to our benefit that she can drive because our kids need to be able to go to school and they need to be able to go to a sports game after work, and she needs to be able to get to a job that she works and that she enjoys. All makes logical sense, right? But you're being told, well, because it's against someone's interpretation of some allegedly sacred book, your wife shouldn't drive. And you would dismiss that out of hand and say, that's a mandate from a cult. So is the EPA regs. Something that would, first and foremost, limit our ability to function as a society, something which we rely upon, so intrinsically tied, so integral to our lives as energy, and you're being told no more. For what purpose? First and foremost, the industry that we're going to lose because people can't afford to run an industry when the electric and the gas prices are so high. Those people who are going to be put out of business and the subsequent jobs that will be lost will move where? They will move to a country that is not abiding by the climate change fatwa. In fact, interestingly enough, many of the Muslim countries don't give a doggone hoot about climate and the climate change crazies. They've already got their own religion that they believe in. You see, here's the point. The EPA regulations that are being injected into the American industry and the American and with willful intent to destruct, they're only going to have a 2% impact on carbon emissions. 2%. But it will have a 40%, a 100%, a 200% increase in the bills of people who heat and cool their homes, of businesses who are trying to use electricity to run a factory or a plant or a mill. And the world's large carbon emitters, and we are one of them, there's no denying it, but there's China and there's India and there's Russia, and they're not following any of this. And they're just too happy to watch us shoot ourselves in the foot 15 minutes before the race begins. So what, we can even the playing field? I mean, what Olympian runner who is the hands-down, odds-on favorite to win would shoot himself in the foot before the race just to balance the competition? That's essentially what we're being told to do. We just did the same thing with medical and Obamacare. Why would we be willing to do the same thing with energy? The whole concept of climate change is based on a fallacy and a group of lies. I know there's those people out there that will say, that's not true. The United Nations has done studies. Yes, the United Nations has done studies. In fact, I just did a program not so long ago that showed you that the summary of the I can't think of the acronym anymore, ICC or ICG, I've forgotten which it is, that their study on climate change, the International Climate Group, I think it's ICG, or C for commission. Their study and the summary that was written was so roundly trounced by the actual authors of the full study, they wouldn't sign off on it. They said it was rewritten to meet political agendas, not to expose the truth, not to accurately summarize what was in the full-blown study. The United Nations is interested in utilizing climate change as an excuse to run a carbon emissions trading scheme. What this is, ladies and gentlemen, is a gigantic vacuum being held over nations, starting with the United States, because we happen to be the wealthiest, to suck the resources and the revenue away from you. The same resources and revenue that they're afraid you're going to use to rise up against them. Hello? You think that's not true? Why are they trying so hard to bar you and limit you from owning firearms or the ammunition to make those firearms worthwhile? They dry up the marketplace willingly. Why? Because they're nervous. They don't like it when you have the ability to fight back. The first thing a bully does is disarm its victim. And they want to limit your ability to have these resources, to fight back against them politically, economically, financially, electorally. They don't want you to have the resources to be able to take out an ad. They don't want you to have the resources to be able to donate to a radio program like this, which runs at a red deficit of every month of $1,000. They want you broke, scared, cowering, and compliant. And they don't care what they got to do to accomplish that. And they don't care who they got to buy off and corrupt to accomplish that. I point you again to the polar bear thing. The numbers were made up to satisfy public demand. That's the statement from the scientists themselves. The argument is in the article's in the Daily Caller. It says this may come as a shocker to some, but scientists are not always right, especially when under intense public pressure for answers. Researchers with the Polar Bear Specialist Group recently admitted to experienced zoologist and polar bear specialist Susan Crockford that the estimate given for the total number of polar bears in the Arctic was, quote, simply a qualified guess given to satisfy public demand. Yet the climate change people went out and ran fatwas based upon it, as if it was empirical truth delivered by the finger of God and written onto the wall. This woman, Crockford, she's been critical all along about the official polar bear numbers and the estimates of their population because they failed to include 5 large subpopulations of polar bears. Oh, there we go with what's the phrase? Lies, statistics, and damn lies and statistics or something. Due to the uncertainty of the population of these areas, the Polar Bear Specialist Group didn't include them in the official estimate. But the Polar Bear Group did include other subpopulations of other bears and those estimates. So basically, they leave out a big chunk of the population and say, well, we're just going to discount this as if it doesn't exist. And then when they put out the number and the population numbers are shockingly low, everyone says, oh my goodness. It's all scams. They said for years that the bear population was between 20 and 25,000. But these estimates are likely much lower than how many real actual polar bears are actually living in the world. Based on the previous estimates given by this polar bear research group and other research reports, it appears that there are probably at least another 6,000 to 9,000 more bears. So hold on a minute. Let's just understand that. So you're saying that there's 20 to 25,000 bears, but the real number is anywhere between 6,000 and 9,000 more, which is anywhere between 20 and 45% more bears than you gave us the impression of. And then utilizing those false numbers, which are clearly falsified because you knew and you had empirical proof that the actual number of bears was higher, but what you really wanted to do was create an impression that wasn't accurate. And then the people in the UN and the Climatechange group and these mad-hatting extremists run off with those numbers as if they were written by the finger of God itself. They planned on, well, first of all, they admitted that it was guesses. But at least it gave a potential size. We're not here to worry about potential sizes. First of all, the whole argument that there can be an empirically accurate count of polar bears is as absurd as trying to tell me that you can make an empirical population count of squirrels. It's inherently flawed because, one, they're all over the place, and two, they're all over the place in the most vast wilderness that exists. Places where human beings can't even go. They're estimates at best. But to underestimate those estimates in an attempt to write a commissioned piece of creative art and then have the EPA issue a fatwa based upon that, that's criminal. And I'm sick and tired of criminal scientists issuing criminal work to criminal bureaucrats who then use that against you and against me. Did you know that nobody in the EPA takes an oath of office? Did you know that? You know why they don't? Because they're not defending the Constitution and the United States of America nor the people thereunder from threats, domestic and foreign. In fact, they are the domestic threat. This is a cult, and it's called the cult of government. They issue fatwas. They demand rigorous following of their edicts. Unlike most religions, they actually back theirs up with guns. Which reminds me of the folks at the Jim Jones compound who came to their senses as they were handed a Dixie cup full of Kool-Aid and said, I'm not sure that this is really the right thing for me to do. But security came up and said, oh, yes, you do. Now drink. And when people began to say, wait a minute, I'm not going to give that Dixie cup of Kool-Aid to my baby, they said, oh, yes, you are. The cult of government has replaced religion for many people. I keep hearing people say to me, well, the total number of believers in the United States and across the continent of Europe and worldwide is down. I think they're just switching religion. They still want to believe in something. And it's easy to have faith in something you can see versus something you can't. The simple truth is that the world constantly has a need to fill the human void within us with something bigger than ourselves. And the simple truth is that those people who have lost their hope or their faith in religion are happily willing to switch from one. It's like an addict who comes off of one drug and then picks up another to replace it with. It's a substitution. Tell me the government's not a religious cult? Think about it. Think about it. Why is it that government swears up and down that they base their decisions on logic and yet don't? They always base them on emotion. I'm going to tell you why. Because emotion is what allows a cult to flourish. If you can get someone emotionally involved, it will override their ability to think logically, rationally, clearly, and insightfully. And that's why they raise the issue of polar bears. That's why they tell us that California will be an inland sea and The Hague will be unlivable. And according to Barack Obama, with the advent of his time in office, the seas will begin to recede and stop rising. He actually said that. Now think about it. The charismatic leader who comes forth, the man who's the first black man to run and become president. He's broken the challenges. He's broken new ground. He's a man of strength and integrity. He's a man who promised this and that and the next thing. But then his human fallacy and human frailness showed through. And we realize what he is. A weak puppet with illusions and delusions of grandeur. Because he's no longer worried about what's the right thing to do for America. Now all he's worried about is, what's going to be my legacy? Who cares? By the time your legacy is written, you're going to be dead and gone. What difference does it make? I attribute that quote to Hillary Clinton. I mean, at that point, Barack, what difference does it make? You're never going to know what they think. This is all about control, people, and it has nothing to do with anything else. I've been telling you that. I told you that about about originally Obamacare. It is the same thing for these EPA regulations. Like a cult, and like every cult that has ever existed, the leaders have a need for iron rule. I posted an article up on our Facebook page this morning, and you can find it there, and I'll attach it to the link in this segment. Obamacare ushering in a national enrollment system. I've been telling you since the beginning of this treason that that's what this was all about. Control, and it had nothing to do with health care. And the EPA is the same thing. It's all about control. It has nothing to do with the environment. They don't give a darn about the environment. And it's only going to fix it by 2%. It's not even going to fix it. It's only going to cut the emissions by 2%. But it's going to impact our economic scenario and the lives of Americans, where their energy bills is a major aspect of their monthly expenditure. healthcare, or in this case, energy, or in this case, clean air, or in this case, clean water, is only the excuse. Why? Because it, like healthcare, it touches every single individual human being without fail. Healthcare is the only thing that, and energy usage, and the industries that surround it, and the EPA, because it's clean air and water, and everybody has to breathe and drink. And it touches every person in their lifetime. It's the only way to get you from birth to death. It's why universal national health care, by the way, has always been in the plank, the plank statements of every totalitarian playbook. Every one, without fail. Every single time. These are merely the steps that are taken by totalitarians, by authoritarians, by oligarchs, by people who mean to be your rulers, and they do mean to rule. You see, the concept of this, once it's introduced and injected into our society, it's like a cancer. And it immediately begins to thrive and breed. And it's metastasized faster than your wildest nightmares. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the United States of tyranny. We're going to wrap this program for the day. I'd appreciate it if you would make sure that you visit two of our sponsors, at least two. One would be their websites at AmericanResumeService.com. AmericanResumeService.com. You can call them at 417-264-2486. That's 417-264-2486. You can also get them by email at info@AmericanResumeService.com. They have an outstanding program where they are basically offering their $200 resume package to all of the America's Voice Now radio and listeners and our friends, basically for half price, 50% off. So it'll cost you $100 to have your resume either rewritten or rebuilt or started from scratch. They go through a process with you where they talk to you about what your, what your history has been, and then they find out what successes you've had, and they redevelop your resume so that it is focused on on those areas where it will give you the greatest opportunity to get to the job interview. And that's what resumes are all about. They will then take that $100 and they're going to donate the entire amount to America's Voice Now to keep us on the air. You can also help us independently by going to our website at americasvoicenow.org. There you can utilize PayPal, and you can make a one-time or a monthly commitment and pledge to us. We are desperately in need of it. We always run on the red, folks. And I cover it, so if you can help us out, we'd greatly appreciate it. In addition to that, you can mail us a one-time payment and a check or a money order or something else, and you can do that by sending to America's Voice Now, P.O. Box 1195 in West Plains, Missouri, 65775. That's America's Voice Now, P.O. Box 1195, West Plains, Missouri, 65775. Please make sure that you visit batterystation.com. They are an outstanding supporter and a longtime friend of this program. You can find them at 303 Washington Avenue. You can get them on the web at batterystation.com, or you can call them at 417-257-7799. If you'd like, you can visit our friends over at Pizza Hut today. Today is a reduced lunch price, and then Thursday's reduced lunch. Tonight, it's family night. Kids under 12 eat free. Make sure that you take the family there. You can get something healthy and tasty all at the same time. Spend some family time together. You'll enjoy that. Make sure that you let these folks know when you speak to them that you heard about it here on America's Voice Now. God bless. We'll see you tomorrow.